Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about common mistakes that I still see people make when they go and purchase a vehicle. Before we get in this video though, as always, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And then if you see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. Let's get into it. The first big mistake that I see people making is not differentiating their wants from their needs with a car purchase. And I think this is super imperative because this leads people into purchasing a vehicle that is more expensive than they would have normally had to have purchased had they differentiated their wants from their needs. And so what this might look like is, let's say that you're in the market for a pickup truck because you like the utility that pickup trucks provide, right? You like the fact that they can tow, and like modern pickup trucks are pretty big, so you can also use it as a family car, and modern pickup trucks are also really comfortable, so you can use it as a daily driver. And so the way that I would approach this whole situation is I would actually start at the base model pickup truck, right? I'd start at the bottom of the range and go, okay, what can this vehicle do? It can, drive, right? It's got climate controls, it can tow, all that kind of stuff. And then once I've looked at what that vehicle can provide, then I start adding things based on what I actually need rather than just what I want. And so again, if we go back to our pickup truck example, maybe this looks like, okay, well, I live in this cold winter climate, so heated seats and a heated steering wheel, that's kind of a must-have so that I'm not like chattering at the steering wheel when I'm driving to work in the morning, right? So that's something that I feel like is pretty reasonable. But then this, leads you down the rabbit hole of understanding that, maybe you don't need the panoramic sunroof. Maybe you don't need the heads-up display that pickup truck can come with. Maybe you don't really need the larger infotainment system. And I think you guys understand where I'm going. There's a lot of options that people get in vehicles that, frankly, they just never use, or even when they use them, they don't really get the full benefit out of those options. And so I think this is something that's super underrated when it comes to buying for a car. I think that the best approach is to start at the bottom and go up rather than starting at the top and going down, because it seems like that's what people do nowadays, right? Whenever a new vehicle is released, everyone looks at the fully loaded version first, and then they go, well, I don't want to pay for that, so then, well, I can live without this and this and that, and I think it's just the wrong approach. Now, the next big mistake that I see people making is not setting a strict budget before they go and buy a vehicle. And this is something that I experienced in car sales all the time. People would come in and they would just have like an approximate idea of what they wanted their monthly payment to be and maybe what they wanted the price of the vehicle to be. And I don't think that's the right way to go about things. I think that there needs to be a strict budget. You need to say, okay, I am going to be financing this car, and so per month I can afford this amount. That is the maximum amount. And then obviously you have to take into account other stuff like maintenance, insurance, all that fun stuff that is associated with running a car. And so when you put all of that together in a strict format, then it obviously does give you a limitation, but I think that limitation is good because then it prevents you from making the first mistake we talked about, which is purchasing a vehicle that probably has too many things that you're not going to use. And so this, again, is another thing that I find very underrated, just setting a strict budget from the start, whether it's a cash budget or a finance budget. Now, the next big mistake that I see people make is not being realistic with themselves when it comes to what they're actually going to use the vehicle for and how long they're going to keep the vehicle. This is something that I saw all the time when I was a car salesman. Like, people would go in and they would want to buy like a diesel truck, for example, and then I'd talk to them about what they'd actually use the truck for, and I'd find out that 99% of it was daily driving, and once every 3 months they'd tow a trailer, and that trailer happened to weigh like 4,000 pounds, and it's like, you don't need a diesel. You could actually do that with a mid-size pickup truck. And so that's the first part. The second part of it is being realistic with yourself with how long you're going to keep the vehicle for. Again, when I sold trucks, I had people come in all the time that was like, this is the last pickup truck I'm ever going to buy. And it's like, yeah, I'm sure that you said that to the last 6 salespeople over the last like 10 years, right? And so I think that being realistic with yourself in terms of your actual buying habits, not what you think you're going to do, is very important. So like, if the last few purchases happened every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, every 4 years, whatever it may be, then just go in with the assumption that that's probably what's going to happen with this next purchase, is you're probably going to keep it for about the same amount of time. Don't lie to yourself and go, oh, I'm actually going to keep it for 10 or 20 years. This is the last vehicle I'm ever going to buy. And it's like, okay, really? Now, the next big mistake that I see people making is being way too committed to a particular model or a particular brand. And you guys know who I'm talking about. And some of you watching this video might be who I'm talking about, right? You only buy from a particular brand or you only buy a particular model. And here's the deal. Yes, there are some pros and cons to every single brand out there, and there are pros and cons to every single model, but the majority of modern cars built, despite what people will say online, are actually pretty good, especially while they're still under factory warranty. And so, just being completely set on a particular model or a particular brand, I think can be a big mistake, because there are other cars that might meet your needs even better than the car that you're looking at a particular model, brand, whatever it may be. And on top of that, they might fit within your budget even better compared to those cars. And so I think that just being open is really important when you're shopping for a car. Speaking of being too set on a model or a car, another big mistake that I see people making is being too set on a particular car deal, right? They've decided they're going to buy this car. They've decided that they're going to buy it at this time period. And so they just completely marry themselves to that idea. And sometimes the deal doesn't make any logical sense, but then the person jumps in and does it anyways because they have to have that car and they have to have it now. And I think this is another big mistake because it can cause you to pay way too much money. Look at all of the people that paid way over MSRP over the last couple of years. I mean, that is a perfect case example, right? If you had just been patient and waited literally, let's say you were looking at a car in 2021. If you had been patient and waited a whole year, that's it, and bought that same exact car at the end of 2022 or the beginning of 2023, you would have literally saved yourself, in a lot of cases, thousands of dollars, and in some cases, over $10,000. And so, being patient with the car purchase is always a good thing to do. And while we're talking about, purchases and money and finances and all that, we need to get into the next mistake that I see people making, and that is not reading all of the paperwork when they purchase a car. This is something that I feel like is super underrated. Dealerships obviously have a process where you go in and you look for a car, and then you obviously negotiate on that car, and then after you're done negotiating, then you go into the finance department, and most people, by the time you get to the finance department, they're so worn out from the rest of the process that they don't really pay attention to all the paperwork that they're signing. And this is a big deal because the finance office is obviously the place where you're going to, they're going to try to sell you warranties and service packages and, potentially accessories. There's all sorts of things that happen back there. And if you don't read all the paperwork, then you won't know exactly how much you're actually paying for all of that stuff. I mean, there are so many examples of people going back there and they just sign all the paperwork, right? They're just I'm just done. And they just sign all the paperwork. And next thing you know, they just purchased $10,000 worth of warranties and service and all of that. And they don't even know it, right? They just know that, their car payment's about the same as, when they originally negotiated it out with the salesperson. So they're fine. That's all they care about. Their car payments stay the same. So just read the paperwork. Now, there are obviously more mistakes that people can make when they are purchasing a car, but those are just some of the mistakes that I see happen on a pretty regular basis when it comes to people purchasing a car. And if you're wondering, out of those mistakes, which one I think is the biggest, it's actually the first one, where people don't do enough research into their needs and they focus on their needs with the vehicle rather than, diving too much into the wants. And I can tell you from a personal standpoint, when I've focused on just what I need out of a vehicle and I don't go in excess of that when I actually option out the vehicle, I've had a much better ownership experience because, well, first off, I end up paying less for the vehicle because I have less options on it because I realize, that package is not actually a need. It's just, I kind of want it because I think it's cool, for example. And the other part of it is everything's more positive because it's I actually use all of the features on the car. And so, moving forward, I've been focusing more and more on this. And like I said, I feel like that's the most important part because, outside of, negotiating with dealers, which, that is slowly going away as time goes on because things are, although not direct to consumer, becoming more direct to consumer. That's the biggest way that you can actually save money on a vehicle, because if you look at the option prices of modern vehicles, it can get pretty big. I mean, you take the base model version of a car and a fully loaded version of a vehicle, and I mean, you look at Jeep Grand Cherokee, for example. Base model Grand Cherokee is $40,000. A fully loaded one is $80,000. That's a $40,000 price swing. And it's do you really need that $40,000 in options? Just giving an example. And so that point out of all of them, I think, is the most important. Let me know which point you think is the most important. I'll see you.